So the camera's broken. It only placed right over you.
I mean, you can see yourself over there.
It's in my email.
It's a bright light. Oh no.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, let's go.
So, I believe what y'all are looking for, and please, if this is not at all going in the direction you want it to, just stop me and say, I have a burning question, ask. So what I was generally asked to talk about is a little bit about grad school. What is grad school? How do you find a grad school? I won't go into like the whole process of applications to grad school. That's a whole another hour where we could talk about that process and how that process is both different now, but also is complicated and can be very lengthy. Pretty much anything in academia, as I'm sure you found out, it takes a long time, right? If this is a scientific journal publication type of club, if you've ever gone through the process of trying to write a manuscript, it is incredibly lengthy. Applications are no different. So the way that I usually like to bring this up is, if you're interested in grad school, right, how do you actually find your fit? More importantly, how do you decide if you're even interested in grad school? So I have a lot of stories that I will tell. I went through this process basically as blind can get. I was incredibly naive to the entire process of what is graduate school? Why on earth would I want to go to graduate school? So hopefully you'll get to learn a little bit from my mistakes, but let's talk a little bit about why. So again, all of you are here. Are you sophomores, juniors, seniors? Junior. Okay. I'm sorry. So a little, pretty much everyone, right? In terms of where you're at in the academic journey. And graduate school is that next step for some of you. Depending on your particular field of study, it may be the next step for most of you, right? Just the fact that you're here may indicate that it's probably going to be the next step for most of you. But why would that step be something that you do? So for myself, when I was an undergraduate student, I remember vividly sitting with my design team, talking about our project, and one of my design team members was super excited that day. She said, I just got into Georgia Tech for my PhD. I'm like, what? We are done with school after next month. She's like, well, no, I'm going to do a PhD. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. That's how completely naive I was to how universities operated. Yeah, I went to class. Yeah, I called my professors professor or doctor. I didn't know what that meant. I worked at a vet med school. So one of my jobs as a college student was working with a veterinarian. We were working on vaccines. I knew we had a vet med degree, but it did not dawn on me that there was a whole path that you could follow that wasn't an MD, wasn't a vet degree, wasn't a dentistry degree, and wasn't a law degree. I did not know that existed. So graduating senior was awesome. So I went out, I got a job. I realized very quickly into my job that what I was doing was training graduate students. I was working in a research institute. I was working alongside of graduate students, people studying to do their PhDs. And about 6 months into it, I'm standing with one of them, I'm teaching her how to do something called a Western blot. Like, I really need to go to school and actually have the credentials to be able to do this, right? And so that's what led me. It was this moment in time for me where I realized, oh, okay, I need to take a next step, right? And the next step for me was based on career goals. My career goals were much larger than my knowledge of the system. And I knew that I wanted to do things that were going to help people. I knew I wanted to do them in ways that other people couldn't. I didn't 100% understand how education was going to get me there. So I started to apply. I called up my old advisor in college. I said, I'm going to apply to graduate school. Where should I go? And he gave me a piece of advice that I will never give a student. He said, Purdue, Purdue, Purdue. I would never give that. I'd never give that advice to a student because, well, Purdue's great, but don't just apply to one school. Right? That was pretty obvious. So I went for now. For some of you, it may just be a passion. Right? For me, it wasn't. I didn't know what I wanted to study when I went to graduate school. I just knew that I wanted to advance my career. I grew up in a small town in Kansas. My grandmother still asks me how school is because she doesn't 100% understand what it is that I do with my life. But for me, it was all about just wanting to take that next step and figure out what my path was. For many of my colleagues, it's about passion, right? It's about motivation. It's about they found something as an undergraduate student they are so intrigued by, they want to take it to the next step. My own graduate advisor, the reason she pursued a PhD is because she wanted to cure epilepsy, period. Like that was her whole goal. She's been working on brain chips ever since. That's what she does. She does it well. She's one of the world-renowned experts in that particular space. I didn't have that, but some of you might. Right? Neither one of those goals are valid, legitimate for pursuing that next step. Now, there's a couple of questions to ask. There's time and there's opportunity cost. Right? So going on to graduate school immediately after your undergrad costs time. For a PhD, it's 5 years. For most master's degrees, it's anywhere from 1 year to 2 years. Not all PhDs are 5 years, some are shorter, some are longer. Anybody like interested in biochemistry? So you smile as if you know what's going to come out of my mouth. So structural biochemistry, like how proteins fold. Yeah. I've had friends who did 7-year PhDs in that particular space because it takes so much time to be able to create the perfect crystal, right? So there's so much amazing stuff that goes into that field, and I'm very envious of people who have the patience to do that. But yeah, it's a long time, right? And there's an opportunity cost associated with that time. You are getting paid as a PhD student. I'll come back to that in a second. But if you're pursuing a master's, it's highly likely you're not getting paid to do that work. You're paying to do that work. And you paying as you're doing that work means you're losing out on salary for a 2-year time period. And that salary benefit may not come back to you immediately. It may take 5 years to be able to recover the salary that you would be earning if you had gone straight into the workforce after your undergraduate degree. Right? So there's a bit of an opportunity cost there. So you do have to ask yourself, is this something that I want to do? And what are my motivations around doing it? So what? Right? There's lots of different options, lots of different types of opportunities. So there are two different types of master's degrees that most science or engineering students go for. There's also an MBA, which we could talk about if that's something that you're interested in, but honestly, it was not a field that I pursued, so my knowledge of it is limited to very superficial. Masters of Science, they typically are either research or course-based. They're usually around 30 credits. They could be structured to be completed in 1 year or up to 2 years, depending on how many credits you take. And the difference between a Master's of Science and a Master's of Engineering. A Master's of Engineering has traditionally been purely course-based, whereas a Master's of Science almost always traditionally had research associated with it. We are seeing right now a convergence of these two paths, right? And that I'm seeing universities get rid of one or the other and just say, here's a master's degree, right? As opposed to trying to distinguish between the different types. Now, there's also the PhD, right? At Lehigh, it's a 72 credit beyond your bachelor's degree journey, but most of that is actually not in courses. So most PhD programs will require you to take about 2 to 3 years worth of courses towards your PhD, but the rest of it is research. A PhD is, you get to take courses. It's a benefit. It's about research. It's about advancing your field. It's about moving your field of science into the next stage. It's about publishing papers, talking to other scientists. I'm getting excited about what it is that you do. It's about, frankly, working with undergrads like yourself. Because most of our PhD students do work with undergraduate students at their institution, right? And so there's a bit of giving back to the community that comes along with a PhD as well. Now, what is the difference, right, between those two levels, master's degrees versus PhDs? Master's degrees are about specialization and continuing to gain technical knowledge in your field. They typically are structured so that you can build out unique skill sets or build out a skill set that you've already started to build as an undergraduate student and simply take it to the next level. PhDs are about knowledge creation. And so it is a transition that students go through to move from I am acquiring knowledge to I am creating knowledge, right? And that is, again, that shift in how your mind works when you are a graduate student, when you are specifically pursuing a PhD. And for many of us, watching that transition is one of the most rewarding pieces of our jobs. Like, I love it when it happens, because I can usually see it. It's just this spark of something different just happened in a conversation with one of my students, and I realized they've made that jump from just wanting to get information to actually help create information. Right? That's kind of the cool thing about a PhD, which I'm a little biased. Yes, I have that. So how do you find the right program? Okay, this is actually a really hard thing to do. It may feel really natural to say to yourself, okay, well, I'm doing my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, so I'm just going to go do my PhD in chemical engineering. And you could, absolutely. But there may be programs out there that have names that you've not heard of. But those names may actually align really closely with your interest area. Right? So cast your net pretty wide as you start to look for different types of programs. But you really want to find something that aligns with your interests, with your aspirations. You know, don't just do Purdue, because that's what some wise man told you. Right? He was very wise. And the reason he said it the way that he did was because Purdue had just gotten a bunch of research money. They were getting ready to hire a bunch of PhD students. It's like, you'd be a great fit for the programs that they offer. So it's very wise. I just didn't see it for what it was. Now, if you are doing a PhD, finding a research mentor that matches you is really critical. So the way that I describe this, your research mentor, your advisor as a graduate student is a spouse. It is like choosing a spouse. Why? spending somewhere between 4 and 7 years with this person. You are gonna work more closely with this individual than just about anyone else in your life. That person's name will follow you around the rest of your career. My CV has my advisor's name listed. All of our CVs have our advisor's names listed. That person is important. But more than just having that name listed, it's also about work style, work ethic, personality matches. I knew that I'd met my advisor pretty much the moment I met her. She was super chill. Like, I don't need someone who's so pent up that I can't have a conversation with you. I could not tolerate that as a student. I mean, I really just would not have been able to. And so when I met her, she sits down and she's like, so what do you think you want to do? Like, holy cow, this is gonna be awesome. Because she had already told me and shown me that she was gonna give me flexibility with my job. That I needed, right? Because as a student, as a PhD student, there's a few different types of paths that students follow. Some of those paths are, this is your research question, these are your experiments, right? This is the paper that you're going to publish. Other PhD advisors are like, hey, here's like a broad area that we're interested in, figure it out. And there's a lot in between. So there's the very rubric approach, and then there's the very hands-off approach. And some of you may need very different approaches depending on your comfort level, the unknown, which research as a PhD student is all about. The unknown. I happen to be on the pretty far right extreme of I need as much flexibility and freedom as someone can humanly give me. Just my personality, also just like my point in life. I'd done a lot of research up to that point, so I knew how to do research. I didn't need someone holding my hand with that particular aspect of it. But we had our grad PhD open house today for the College of Engineering. And one of the students sat down with me and he goes, so I'm going to talk to you about something. Spill. He says, so I've been talking to a lot of different advisors, and it seems like some advisors are going to be more in the lab than others. Yeah. Yes. And you're going to need more help. So should I go with an advisor that seems like they're going to be in the lab more often? If you think that you're going to need more help, if you are going to want to have someone more present, use that gut instinct, right? Take it, run with it, pick the advisor that you feel like is going to give you the most support in the way that you need. Is that gut feeling? I mean, I know it sounds very non-scientific. You know yourself. And you know what you need. You may have to think through it a little bit, but that's what you're looking for, right? As you're thinking about graduate studies. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things that go into this. So how many of you know that PhD students get paid? Okay, so what was that?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, right? So PhD students, you are, how do I put this? You are provided a stipend and tuition credits to pursue your PhD. In return for that, you do research related to a faculty lab. So it is an appointment that you have deliverables for. You lose that stipend if you don't make satisfactory progress as defined by your program. But PhD programs are paid for. Remember that? Just put it in the back of your head. I did not know that. So when someone handed me a letter that said they were going to pay me, I didn't know how much to expect. I didn't know to expect that letter. I looked at it and went, where am I signed, right? Because I thought I was going to have to pay you to go to school. Because that's how undergraduate worked, right? I paid tuition. I got an education. No. PhD programs, totally different. The master's programs are different. Master's programs, it depends on the institution. Yes.
So why doesn't that happen for med school?
Yeah, well, so med school actually does have a path for that. It's called an MD PhD. It's a long path. But students that I know who have had financial need, who don't want to go close to $150,000 in debt to attend medical school, because that's about the debt that most of my friends who went to medical school walk out with. I have 3 people as a PhD student who are doing it. And the whole idea behind that is you do your MD, then you go earn a PhD, the whole thing's paid for. Then you do your residency. I'm trying to remember how long Travis was in school. A friend of mine, he's a cardiothoracic surgeon right now, and he did this panel. When I met him, I was a second-year PhD student. He had already done 2 years of medical school and was in his 3rd year of his PhD. And I think he was in school another 4 years after that before he moved to his residency. But it was pretty cool. So for him, totally worth it. You know, he had grown up on, and basically he grew up on a farm in Indiana, and he was the first person in his family to go to college. So for him, that expense was extraordinary to think about adding that. But he really wanted to get this. He's a tremendous cardiothoracic surgeon. Works at one of the major hospital systems in the United States. So, good question. Law school, same thing, except they don't have a JD PhD path. Just thinking about law school. Don't think that exists. Okay, so what are you looking for? Right. So think about when you chose an undergraduate institution. Right? What did you look for?
I really didn't know what to look for. Like my didn't help me at all. I didn't really know how to apply. So I learned how to apply like from TikTok. Right? I learned what college was through TikTok. So my parents like
Didn't know.
my
either.
mom is an immigrant. My dad like didn't have time. Didn't really know what to do.
I'm still stuck on the fact that TikTok has how-to videos on that is not surprising, but yeah, it's gotta be a good resource, right? I mean, quick and okay.
But I just transferred here, so like, what to look for. So
Where are you transferred from?
And were you originally from or did you grow up in the Philadelphia area?
I grew up like near Harrisburg.
Okay, okay. So at least, so did you mostly apply to schools that were close?
I applied to just three schools. I don't tell my parents this, but I only applied to Temple, Pitt, University of Southern California, and University of Texas, Austin. And yeah, I went to the cheapest one.
That's a key point, right? That's one of the ways that you chose an institution. Right? How much money? What is the funding? I know that a lot of students who come to Lehigh, it's well, they gave you the best financial aid offer. Yeah, I mean, those types of questions still go through your head. You know, is it close to home? If you want it close to home, or is it as far away from home as you can get? Right? Because for some of you, you are probably literally as far away from home as you can get. You know, do you want to pursue a higher ranked institution? I will say for all of you, students who get degrees from Lehigh go on to top ranked graduate schools. We have students who are at MIT, Berkeley, Stanford, doing PhDs. We've had plenty of students graduate from those programs with PhDs and who are now faculty at other institutions. So a Lehigh undergraduate degree is valid. It holds a lot of value out there in the graduate school world. Because I think they understand how to train. And I'm always every year I perpetually just in awe of student successes in this area. I write probably 100 recommendation letters every year. And every time I get an email from students saying, I got it here, I got it here, it's just so amazing. It's so amazing to see, right, that next step when you get into that school that you thought maybe a little bit out of reach. Those are all things that you think about, right? So as you think about where you want to take the next step, are the alumni successful? If an institution does not show you anything about alumni, reconsider. Most of the big ones, you know that they've got alumni placed in all places, all over the world. But smaller programs ask, right? Ask for their alumni in place. Because there's actually two key points to this. The first one is obviously you want to make sure you're going to be able to get a good job. An advanced degree in engineering or science, you're going to get a good job. The main reason why you should ask, if they don't know, it means they're not student-centric, right? They're not focused on you as a student. They're focused on some other thing that is undefinable. So ask, because student-centric places, places that want their students to be successful, know those student success stories, right? They know them by heart. We actually are really, really intentional about that here. We have a small program. We do want to attract the best students, but more than anything, we care, like we truly care about where you go, what you do, and the type of job that you get. So look for that, because it's going to matter. You're going to be a lot happier that way. Also look at things like what type of professional development support does an institution offer? What type of resources do they offer specific to graduate students? So as undergraduates, you know, you've got access to the gym, the wellness center, psychological support services, tons of housing options, right? Dining services. I feel like there's a whole bunch more that I'm missing. Not all of those things are actually open to graduate students. So check. If you know that, for example, if you have an ongoing medical condition that you're going to need health and wellness support for, make sure that health and wellness is available to graduate students. Because private health insurance is very, very expensive. And private health insurance is about the only feasible way to have access to care outside of the university system. If you know that writing is one of your more challenging tasks that you need to do, look for writing support right within an institution. Are there people there to help you with writing your first paper, with writing your resume, with writing all of these things that you're going to have to write as a student? It's lots of things to potentially look for. Why does all this matter? Being a graduate student is different from being an undergraduate. Being a graduate student, I'm not even sure how to say this. My students, my PhD students, I will watch a transition where they go from being someone who can probably still get away with going out on a Thursday and a Friday and a Saturday night to someone who pretty much only maybe sees friends on like Saturday afternoon. Right? And it's one of those things that I watch. Okay. One of my students is getting very close to that point. He has made the transition away from being an undergraduate student into being a full-on PhD student. And it's basically a transition to adulthood, where you have a job. Graduate school, especially a PhD, it's a job. You're getting paid to do it, but it's different because it's very self-motivated. You no longer have homework, where you have to sit down and homework is due on January, whatever. Suddenly, your deadlines are longer, more fluid, less rubric. There's no grade. So the way that I generally work with my students is we try to set miniature goals. So year one, by the end of month 2, I need you to have written a lit review. Doesn't sound hard. Imagine that being what you do every day. That's what you sit down, you read papers. When I say a lit review, I don't mean 5 or 6 papers. I mean a few hundred. papers. Right, so to be able to read that, I know I'm not trying to scare anybody. It's actually very, very worth it. It's fascinating. You get really excited about it, but to be able to read that kind of volume of literature and synthesize it into something that is a summary, that's one of the biggest steps that you'll take as a student, but it has to be self-motivated. I don't call my students every day and say, hey, did you read 5 papers today? If they do it, great. If they don't, okay. I'm not going to check on you. Most of my peers, very similar. We do expect you to be able to maintain timelines, but maintain them independently. Right, so there's an independence to being a graduate student that you don't have as much of being a graduate, where you've got tests and works and everything else that's kind of keeping you on track in class. It's resonating. You feel like, okay, when I go to class, I know I have this homework due, and I have this exam, I have to do these things this week. Do we have a schedule like that? Imagine trying to set that schedule entirely on your own, without external factors driving it. It can be hard. So that's one of the biggest differences I've seen between undergraduate and graduate. And that self-motivation, that self-drive can help push you through. Right. So, how do you eventually narrow down options? You got to look at the types of things that they're looking for, the types of places that you're looking for yourself. And again, don't just choose Purdue. 5 schools is usually a good target. And it's never too early to start looking. Even as a first year student, is something you could absolutely start looking at today to think about, okay, this is the path that I want to take. This might even be the professor that I might want to think about working for, right? And down the line. So start to look, start to see. And again, you've all had the experience to some extent of choosing an undergraduate institution. Now it's time to cast that net out a little bit wider. Remember, students from Lehigh go to better schools than Lehigh for graduate school. So aim high. So how do you actually compare between programs? Right, again, so one of the differences that I said between master's programs and PhD programs, the master's programs are course-based. So one of the questions that I'll tell students to ask about any program is, are the courses that you're going to be taking any interest? Do they look interesting? Do they look different than what you took as an undergraduate? That may actually be a question that is the deciding factor. I've had students look at programs and say, these courses don't sound very interesting. Like, the name of the program sounds fascinating, but the courses themselves sound really, really horrible. Program for you, right? Even if it's got the greatest name in the world, it may not be right if the classes don't sound intriguing. If there is a faculty member that you think you might want to take a class under, Zoom is amazing. I'm not. The number of people that I've connected with over the last 2 years that are in all parts of the world that I never thought I'd be able to talk to. Amazing. Try to connect. See if there's any type of synergy. See if there's a faculty member there that just kind of is intriguing in one way, shape, or form. So consider who the faculty are. But I think more importantly, talk to students. So students are going to tell it like it is. They're not going to sugarcoat it. They're going to tell you if they're miserable. They are going to tell you if they are happy. They're going to tell you if they're stressed. They're going to tell you if the food sucks. They're going to tell you if housing is hard to find. They're going to tell you, oh, don't even worry about health and wellness because, yeah, you can never get in. They're going to tell you all of these things. It will be unfiltered. So talk to students. Faculty like myself, we're in charge of sales. The way to put it. So don't always trust the faculty to tell you how it is. Trust the students to give you the unfiltered aspects of how it actually is. One of the first things I do whenever anyone contacts me and says, I'd really like to do a PhD in your lab. I'm like, yeah, let's see if you're going to do a PhD in my lab. And I put them in touch with my students. Like, here are 5 people that you can talk to about what it's like to work in my lab. They're going to tell it to you like it is the good, the bad, the ugly. 30% of the students come back to me and say, hey, I met with so-and-so and it sounds great and I want to start. Okay, well, you've met with the right people. They've told you the horror stories. Great. Let's get you in the lab. The other 70% I don't hear from yet because I think they figured out it's not a match. Right? If I had a student who says to them, yeah, she like was at the lab once a week, and that student is a student who's thinking, I'd like to see someone explain their day, right? I need that interaction on a regular basis. I'm not going to be a good fit. You recognize that by getting the unfiltered viewpoint from students. Because for me, all days run together, and I wouldn't know if I was in the lab yesterday or today or tomorrow because all days run together. I think I'm in the lab every day, but apparently I'm not. So also look at funding opportunities. Again, PhDs are funded. Look at the degree of funding, look at the type of funding, right? So there are different types of funding for PhD programs. There are research assistantships, which are funded through usually government research dollars. There are teaching assistantships. You've taken lab courses with TAs. Yeah, so they're all paid on teaching assistantships, right? It's part of their funding package to do a PhD is providing educational support to students. There are some graduate assistantships which serve as things like office support or tech support or other types of support structures. They all come with a different type of funding. So look at types of funding that are available. And then, are there any scholarships? If you're going to do a master's, are there scholarships? What kind of scholarships? How much are the scholarships? Scholarships are hard to find right now, not gonna lie. But they're out there. As an example, I know that at Cornell University, 30% of their master's students receive at least a 50% scholarship. So look for that, right? See what's out there, and then start to compare between the programs that might be interesting to you. And then for research-specific programs, you got to look for research interest, right? Alignment of expectations around what research means to that particular lab. It could be that your research advisor wants you to publish 6 papers. And you might be thinking, that seems like a lot. And for most bench research, it is a lot. Most students in my lab graduate with 3. I'd like it to be more than that, but I'm a realist. So align the expectations. Understand what it is you might be getting into by asking all of the right questions. And I can't stress this piece enough. Recognize this is a partnership. So as I mentioned, we just finished our PhD open house. So we invited all of our admitted PhD students across the College of Engineering to come visit. So we did a dinner last night, we did a poster session. Today we did department visits where faculty and other students met with our prospective students. So this is common. You don't get invited to visit a school, but you get an offer of admission. Ask to go and visit. They should absolutely want you to visit. It is going to be your home. So it's a partnership. Also, once you get an offer of admission, you now hold all the power. So, but when a school offers you admission to a program, they want you. Period. They are going to try to get you to join their program. You're going to get emails from the best professors. You're going to get emails from grad recruiters. You're going to get emails from other students. You're probably going to get phone calls. You're probably going to get additional scholarship offers. When a university wants you, they want you. You hold the power at that moment. So choose for you, not because someone else is pushing you to choice. So really, you got to consider the entire experience of graduate school and of the program that you are looking at. Things to look for. Look for, again, writing centers, health centers, fitness centers, housing, parking. let's say that again, parking, transportation, childcare. May not be something that all of you have to worry about right now, but I have had many colleagues who needed childcare when they were going through their PhD programs. I had a few friends who actually had children in the middle of a PhD program. Like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine taking care of my dog, let alone a baby, and trying to do this. But it may be a choice that you end up making for yourself, right? And I want to tell you, it is the right choice. There is no wrong choice in kind of defining a path through your graduate school experience. You choose to do a master's, amazing. You choose to do a PhD, amazing. If you choose to have a family while you're doing a PhD, amazing. Okay? Any and all of these choices are good choices to make. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay? You only have one life to live, unless you believe in reincarnation, in which I think would be really cool. Yeah. As a human being, with this particular set of opportunities, you got one life. Academia, graduate school, there is a lot of negativity around choosing to live your life. Because it is an arduous path, it is a challenging path, it is a difficult path. But there are lots of people out there who successfully done it all. Continue to successfully do it all. I'm amazed at them every single day. So yeah, I've had friends get married and start their families in the middle of a graduate degree. And at every step of the way, we support. But I do know that some of those same friends dealt with a lot of negative reactions from the people around them. So I just want you to know it's okay to do all of those things. It's not going to take away from your potential as a student. So look for what's available at different types of schools. And then of course, geography. Now, I said PhDs are paid for. $30,000 in the Lehigh Valley. It's a very, very different number than $30,000 in San Francisco. So compare the cost of living. There is something known as a living wage indicator. So you can actually compare, and there's I think it's called PhDstipends.net or PhDstipends.com. You can go and look at PhD stipends that are being offered at schools around the nation. So you can see, first of all, if you got a fair package, fair offer. But second of all, you can compare it to the living wage. If it's below the living wage calculator for that region, probably want to think about elsewhere. You don't want to be financially struggling while you're trying to do the graduate program. It's hard enough to go through the effort of doing one, but you add to that financial struggle and it becomes almost. So look, compare. If you apply to graduate school this year, next year, the year after that, get an offer letter, I just don't know, just send it to me. I'll take a look. Happy to take a look. Happy to compare. Happy to give you an assessment of whether or not it might be. So is it convenient to travel to? Especially for those of you who are international students and may want to be able to go home occasionally, being close to an airport might matter. So there are some places in the world that are hours away from the nearest international airport. Driving to an international airport, jumping on a flight, flying to Newark, and then flying to wherever it is you're going, because that's usually the path they all take. It's just so much time. So think about travel convenience if it's important to you. And then there's the nothing versus everything argument. I've had a lot of students who, I want to go to UCLA because I want to serve. Great. When are you gonna have time to do that? They find the time. In fact, one of my closest friends from grad school, she is they actually should email her. Her tenure letter should be coming this semester. So she is a professor of civil and environmental engineering. She is at UCLA, and the reason she chose to do her PhD at UC Irvine was specifically because she wanted to serve. And somehow she has managed to find the time. So she not only surfs, she does regular surfing, wind surfing. And her area of research is in computational wave dynamics. So she looks at waves and flood patterns. So that's how she gets away with it. So her university bought her a boat to do her research. She spends her time out. She's got it made. I'm totally jealous, obviously, but every time we go out to see her, I'm like, how do you manage this? Like, she's like, yeah, I'm gonna go surfing today. I can't find time to eat lunch. Like, how do you? It's all in time management. She figures it out. She's very, very good at it. She's also probably smart. So it probably helps. But I went to a place, so Purdue, that literally had nothing to do. Purdue is in the middle of a cornfield. It's a massive university in the middle of a cornfield. We've been to Purdue, it's about 60,000 students. I was literally one in a sea of other students. But there was nothing to do. So I would go to work on campus. I would work, and then I would go to my apartment. Repeat, 7 days a week. That was my life. It worked out for me. I was very dedicated. I got through my PhD very quickly, but I had a lot of friends who they needed the outside life. They needed to be able to do things outside. They needed museums and musicals and theater and all of these things that make life rich. So if you're someone who can survive a few years with literally nothing to do, that's a great choice. If you're someone who really, really, really needs culture, think about it before you sign up for some place that's in the middle of a cornfield. So Purdue was great. I love Purdue. I would go back there in a heartbeat. My husband refuses. So he needs everything to do. So also climate, this is silly. Okay? We are in Pennsylvania where we don't know if it's summer or winter, and it's the middle of March. So the reason I say climate, again, it's a long time. If you hate the cold, you might want to rethink someplace like Northwestern. It's cold in Chicago. If you hate the heat, Texas may not be the best place. Again, it's a quality of life issue. It's a long time. You've got a lot of things you got to do during that time, especially PhD. Masters, go anywhere. You can deal with bugs and humidity for a couple of years. Most people can. But if you have a lot of allergies, Lehigh Valley is probably not the best place for you. Think about these things as you. I realize they sound silly, but they do matter. They do really, really matter. I've had students tell me that they came to Lehigh specifically because, well, the buildings were beautiful. For a PhD student, there should have been a different reason for this. I mean, our buildings are beautiful. I really wanted to be here. Oh, okay. I'm not going to question it. Our buildings are beautiful. Some of the interiors need some work, but the outside buildings, yeah, beautiful. So think about where are you going to be? What are you going to be doing? And is it something that you want to do? For example, my friend who does wave dynamics, one of the other places that she could have gone and done wave dynamics was someplace really, really, really far north of Canada. Even if it's on the coast, you're gonna be so miserable on the boat every day, freezing, literally freezing as you collect data from all of your sensors that you throw out into the ocean, which is why she's in Southern California. Sorry.
Okay. So we've already talked a little bit about funding, and again, just like a mess up.
Who to actually talk to, current students, grad directors, faculty, grad life offices. There's lots and lots of resources out there as you navigate this. But more than any, I just like to answer any questions. I know I probably didn't address 90% of the burning questions in the room about what grad school is really like. The best person to ask is a current grad student. So, I answered for you.
So I'm currently just doing the whole research thing, looking at every place possible and every forum possible and talking to people. And I see that one of there's this one question that you sort of addressed, but people give different answers. Are you able to, as a STEM PhD, be able to work efficiently enough to make it a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday? Or is that just like completely out of your ordinary? And I understand, like, of course, sometimes you have to get results on a weekend, you go and you get it done. But if you're able to manage your time well enough, can you get a regular schedule and be able to balance other things like that?
I'm gonna say yes, and the reason I say yes is I've seen lots of students do it. One of my first PhD students, I was intrigued because like day one, she set her work schedule 10 to 6. And I would show up at her office at 10 o'clock, where she'd be, and I'd leave at 6:30, and she would wave at me at 6 o'clock and she left. That was her schedule. She stuck to it. It's funny because her actual work schedule, like out in the world, is like 80-hour weeks. She's miserable. She's not. She really, really loves her job, but there are times she's in the pharmaceutical industry, and the last 2 years have been rough, very, very rough on pharmaceutical researchers. So yeah, it's possible. It may not be 8 hours. It may be closer to 9, but it is possible. You do have to be very, very diligent and very focused and not give in to all of the distractions. And I have a lot of colleagues, even now, you know, as you think about moving into a faculty position, there are blogs out there written by faculty who manage families and regular hours and don't check their email at midnight. I realize that sounds a little weird to most of us, right? But there are people out there that work-life balance and family are the most important aspects of lives. There's no shame in that. I actually have schedules myself right this semester. I realized last year that I was basically already burnout. COVID took a lot out of me. Being the associate dean has taken a lot out of me, and especially during COVID, because I became the associate dean 2 months after COVID started, and I was basically already in the associate dean role when it was official the day that COVID started. So that was fun. It took a lot out of me. So I said to myself this semester, I said, okay, I will be at the office from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Occasionally I'll have 1 or 2 evening events. This week I've got 2. And I will not work on Saturdays. It's worked. I feel less burnt out. So it's okay.
So another issue that I'm running into is, so my major is a little all over the place. And in terms of the research that I'm doing, it doesn't line up exactly. And so I find that when I'm reaching out to like grad directors and faculty and even students, that I'm a little bit out of my expertise. And so when I want to talk about research, but I just don't have the coursework basis to understand it. I feel like I need to get like accustomed. I need to understand what's going on in a grad program, but I just literally can't right now. Is there a workaround to that? Like other than just waiting for like next semester when I know I'm taking a lot of courses that are more suited?
Well, I mean, so first, don't sell yourself short. I think what you're probably struggling with is more of the intellectual need to feel to think that you're to for yourself to know what you're asking. But what's going to give you the most information is just asking the questions. You may not have the right language yet, but ask more. So what are you working on and why is it important? Simple questions, and you're going to be able to grasp quite a bit of this, right? Even through even through the technical vernacular and everything else that happens. But again, what are you doing and why is it important? If you can nail down the why is it important with people, that is probably going to tell you more about whether or not it's a good program than the nitty gritty specific details of exactly what someone is doing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I had no clue what any of the research at Purdue was when I went to interview. I knew enough to understand some fundamental, I knew I had to take a math class. Like that was basically where I was at. And when I met with Jenna and she was talking about cells and the brain and epilepsy and maze and like what's happening right now. So I asked, so we're talking about a lot of things that I don't 100% understand, right? So I was honest with her. I said, so can you talk to me a little bit about why it matters? Maybe not about the details of the science, but really just like who are we going to help in doing this? And how can this help? And at that moment, she recognized what she had done, which was go into the technical way too fast. We are guilty of that. We know it. There's no, absolutely, again, if you ask the right question, why are you doing it? It gives us that mental checkpoint. Say, I need to explain this differently. Right? I need to explain this in a way that makes sense, establishes the importance of the work, but doesn't dive into the specific receptor that's going to translate into this thing, and it's going to fold in this way, that's going to trigger this particular signal pathway. I know you're biocomputational, so all of that should have made sense, right? And there are mathematical methods that kind of fit into that. So what type of research are you thinking about getting into?
I want to do exactly what I am doing,
Okay.
but I am finding that because I haven't, like, Virgo's not in my curriculum, curriculum, that when I approach people like at BPS like a few weeks ago and tried to ask about certain things, I was just like, whoa, is she talking to me? I wouldn't even be able to like understand what question to ask.
So, and I think, you're talking with people at a technical meeting where the expectation is that they are speaking in very technical language. Great way. Pull a couple papers. We talked to a couple people that are like, I think this is kind of interesting. Pull a paper and go through that due diligence of looking at every word.
Yeah.
We have all been there. Yeah. I remember my very first undergraduate research experience. It was my second actually. So I was working with that college. Talking about immunology and also immunology receptors involved with the immune response. I had not taken basic chemistry. I had never taken a college level biology class. Fun fact, I've still never taken a college level biology class. And I am a bioengineer in fact. I've taken a lot of environmental systems. I've taken a lot of chemistry, but basic cell biology. So I didn't get an NSF fellowship. Not kidding. The NSF fellowships, they're things that students can apply for that fund your PhD. And the reason that the reviewer cited for not ranking me higher is, well, she's never taken a cell biology class. How's she going to do any of this work? Show you. Literally the thought in my head. It does take time, and the classroom will definitely help as you move into it. But and a lot of it is getting intentionality and just being very diligent about looking at the stuff that you got.
So I'm interested in potentially doing an MD patient. I guess now it's like really important for me to try to start doing research. For the summer, I don't know. I just got a letter back So I applied to an internship at this place called Monell Chemical Science Center in Philadelphia. And I worked there last year. It was great. And they just invited me back this year. Well, I don't know if I should stick with the same lab or if I should try to find something that is more of my interest. So I guess I'm just kind of like, you think I should stick with like the same lab that I've been with for a while, or should I kind of like branch out?
First year student, right?
Yeah.
Take whatever offers you get. Okay, not kidding. Getting any type of offer as a first year student is anything. So stick with it this year, branch out next year. Because what it's gonna do, having 2 years of experience in one lab or 2 summers of experience in one lab, you are gonna be able to talk about what that lab does at the next level. You're gonna be at the level, right, that Stephen is talking about, and being able to talk in all of the really technical terms. And so it's okay to focus a little bit and then branch, and then focus and then branch. That's okay. The overall kind of breadth of your experience will, I think, serve you quite well, having some breadth in the future, but also having just a little bit of depth is never. My own research background, as I made my way through undergrad, I started in a plant pathology lab where I looked at dirt. It was chemically contaminated, so carcinogenic chemicals, nasty. I still do not remember the name of the stuff that I was working with, but I'm pretty sure it maybe shortened like nasty stuff, and I wasn't very well trained. Learned how to work on an HPLC, learned how to fix an HPLC, learned how to order worms. This was before Amazon, so I had to order worms to see if they survived in the soil that we had treated with a fungus. So this fungus is supposed to break down the carcinogenic chemical. Crazy stuff. But then you had to test it to see whether or not it would support life, and the life that it needed to support were Georgia red worms. So I learned how to order worms. All of these experiences then got me my next job, which had nothing to do with plant pathology, okay, which was in vet med, making vaccines for cattle, where one of my primary roles was, actually there were 2, sifting through cattle feces to analyze it and leading mice to determine whether or not our vaccination protocol had worked. 2 really horrible tasks. I don't want to wish I ever wish on anyone. Experiments. I learned a lot. I learned a ton in that lab. I learned more than I could ever imagine. He was not very nice. Like my supervisor was not the greatest person in the world, but I learned a lot. After that, I worked on bioprocessing for raspberry jam. A lot of people in my department did food science. Had a need for someone to look at the gelatinization of raspberry jam, and basically the timeline associated with that, because they were trying to move away from animal products being used in this raspberry jam product into more vegan products, because this was going to be the timeline when human health and diet and things like that will become more popular. Yeah, so I worked on raspberry jam.
There's a lot of food scientists at Monell.
And food science is one of those fields that's so broadly applicable because they take all the techniques that everyone else uses and just apply them to food, which I think is cool. You learn a lot in working with the different techniques.
And I was thinking maybe I can like actually gear my time towards something like I'm really interested like here. Like I could have that going on in the summer, but like during the year I could like actually do something bioengineering test, like for credit maybe.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah, I know you've been doing research for credit for many semesters.
Yeah, starting sophomore.
Yeah, so that's definitely a good approach. Especially if they pay you to work over the summer. Right?
it's a pretty good deal. Because
So-
I would also like to work here, but I mean, I guess be home if I work with Monell and I just wake. It's actually really nice. I wake up, drive to the train station, take the train to Philly. It's like I'm living like my own adult life. Take the train back. It's nice, but
Well, and again, it's a job, right? So there's that 40-hour week kind of mentality that is built into any type of a true summer job that, in my opinion, when I look at student resumes, people applying to my lab, I look at things like that. I don't just look at where they did their undergraduate degree and all of the accomplishments as a student. I actually do look at work experience. For me, I look for students with, it's overused, the word that we grit. You know how to work hard because they have to work hard. And I think part of that is, again, my own background. None of us came easy to me, obviously. I told you I had no idea what was going on. I still don't know what's going on most of the time, but it didn't come easy. I had to bust my ass to get through it. I have a total of grades on my record that I would really like to have removed. Fluid mechanics and physical chemistry, like worst classes. When I got into graduate school, I took the math class. I'd been out of school for about 2 years when I went to graduate school, and was in the grad level math class at Purdue. And I realized very quickly that, first of all, I forgot any math that I ever thought I knew. I knew none of it. And second of all, my institution probably needed to have a complete redesign of its entire math education. Because apparently there are textbooks for differential equations. We didn't have a textbook. He taught us everything in MATLAB, but didn't really teach us how to use MATLAB. So we're like doing differential equations, but there's no theory behind it. And I get it to Purdue, and it's all theory. I didn't know what an eigenvalue was. Just think about that as a second, right? As students, you'll learn if you haven't yet heard that phrase. For graduate students sitting in this class, I have no idea what an eigenvalue is. So for me, I had to work really, really hard. I remember sitting in that class thinking, I'm going to fail this class. I'm going to fail out of graduate school, and then I'm going to cry. Because you have to maintain a certain GPA. I managed to make my way through. I had to go home a couple of times, sat down with them. I remember the first time I sat down and I said, so I'm really struggling and I'm not sure what to do. I don't even understand what you were saying, let alone any of the numbers or things that your letters, whatever it is you're writing on the board. He says, oh, what textbook did you use for differential equations? And that's when I realized, oh, crap, wait, I was supposed to have a textbook? And so when I said that, he's like, just turns around, takes the book off the shelf, hands it to me. You're on your own. Okay, so very different environment than being an undergraduate student. And it was a bit of a shock, but I met some friends who were also struggling with my own, were smarter than I was, and we got through it together. I really like to hear that B on my transcript. And the other 2 grades in undergrad were C's. So the other thing I need to impress upon, if you do have a mark on your transcript that you're not proud of, it's okay. Most of us have them. Never admit it out loud. Most people are not students. So most of us have something that we would really like to have. For me, it was those 2 classes. So.
sometimes I really worry about that. Like, I always have like the whole like pre-med thing, like always kind of in the back of my head. So like, whenever I do get a bad grade, I'm just like, but then recently, I don't know, I took like 2 midterms and they weren't like what I was expecting. But part of me was just like, okay, like not like defeatist, but like for my circumstances, I put everything I could towards this. And I've been trying to just enjoy life a little bit more. Like I picked up the guitar and like fucking little strings. And yeah, I'm gonna be doing that over spring break. But I'm also gonna try to catch up and whatever I don't know.
Well, I think that it's an important thing. I do enjoy. I only have this chance once. Maybe it's just my old age talking, but kind of parts of it. I had some fun with some of the graduates. And as a graduate student, they finally got me to come out of my shell like the last 3 weeks I was there. So, yeah, the last 3 weeks of school of my graduate degree were very exciting. I kind of wish I would have had more of that. I missed out on making some really good friends. I made a couple of great friends, but not as many as I probably. Medical school, though, GPA is important. But MD, PhD, again, it's a slightly different path. You've got a slightly different subject.
That's a little.
So again, it depends on the program. But if it's something you're interested in, we should probably get you talking to the pre-med advisor soon. Because there are probably very specific things.
I'm like trying to get a master's and stuff. Could you get like sponsored from like certain jobs? You get like an internship or something? Like, how do you like look for those?
So, yeah, many companies offer tuition reimbursement or tuition credit. Usually it's part of their benefits package. So you can actually Google if you're looking at a job at Apple. Does Apple pay for? And usually, I believe there's lots of Glassdoor articles on the different organizations that do and don't. I will say, especially for a lot of large tech organizations, it's becoming less common because they've brought everything in-house. So why would Apple pay for someone to go to graduate school when they can just run a series of massive online courses for their employees? And we're seeing that with Amazon. Amazon in particular has very large like, secondary education. But most of the mechanical engineering companies, like manufacturing companies, almost all of them have higher ed credits as part of it. You may have to put them there.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to, like, add on to that. My sister's actually, she works at work and she's doing her master's through Lehigh, which is a coincidence at the same time. And I think the way that they do it is like they say, we'll pay, and she's only been there for 2-3 years, but they say like, okay, here's the amount of money that we're gonna put towards it, get into a grad school, and we'll send them a check.
How do friends do that as well? Actually, one of the guys that I managed to make it through math with was being funded by Honda. So yeah, that's where he'd been at Honda for a couple of years and yeah, go do a grad degree. He was residential, which was unusual. Because usually it's part-time. So he took 2 years to do a grad degree and Honda paid for about 60% of it. He's still at Honda. He's working on
What would your favorite type of car be? Or your dream car?
my favorite type of car. Well, it's my husband is a car guy, so that's a loaded question. So many. To be honest, it's a car that you can really get anywhere else. Any one of the small Audi or BMW diesels, hatchbacks that are in Europe, any one of those, I'd be very, very happy. The reason they've got so much torque, they're so much fun to drive, they're relatively economical in terms of efficiency, and they are German, engineered, so they've got a lot of luxuries that you don't. 911. Porsche 911. Yeah, he loves his cars. I think that I actually take that back at NSX.
accurate NSX, one of the old ones, or that, I think that was one of, just erased one of those ones. And then there's this really rare that it's like a sports, one of the sports, I don't even remember what it's called. But he actually had a seat. It was a lot of fun. And he's a car guy. So he also is a computer engineer who's like nearing 50 and has been working since he was 22. So financially, he's been able to buy education on his car, which is so, yeah, my husband is a computer engineer from Lehigh. The same company now for about 12 years. She's at Comcast. And did release done really well, right? And he just has a bachelor's degree. So he actually did go back to do a master's. He applied to Villanova and took one class. He's like, no. It was too theoretical, and at that point in his career, he'd been out for about 4 years. He's very practical. Like, it's got to have an application, and there has to be a point to it. And if it's just theory, he does not care. And so I realize I shared a lot, but again, hopefully, hopefully, if nothing else, let you know my door is open. I'm happy to talk about these things. I know there's big decisions, and it's one that it will be the right decision at the time to make. Life has a funny way of working out that way. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Sorry, my last slide. So messed up. I really enjoyed it. I have a lot of different types of information. I've got a whole time.